Tonight, rain brings a much-needed reprieve on the south coast, but it's proving more of a hindrance than a help for firefighters. Good evening, I'm Juanita Phillips. This is ABC News. A Navy warship arrives off the coast of Eden, but with roads now open, has the ship already sailed?
A bit late, really. Like, seriously, the armed forces should have been in place in August when this was all starting to unfold.
Fears for the birds and the bees, the terrible toll of the bushfires on the natural world.
And the Golden Globe goes to...
And Russell Crowe wins a Hollywood award, but is too busy fighting fires to collect it. Rain has fallen across large parts of the south coast, bringing relief to weary fire-affected residents. But rather than help firefighters, it's been more of a hindrance. Too little to extinguish the blazes, but too much for backburning to be carried out. Now all the fireys can do is strengthen containment lines. It's been confirmed that an 8th person has died in the South Coast bushfires, an elderly man who was defending his home in the small community of Nerragunda. Another person is unaccounted for. Power is still cut for thousands as authorities try to get on top of the situation before conditions deteriorate later this week. Antoinette Collins reports from Batemans Bay.
Driving in the rain has never felt so good.
How's this rain?
Fantastic, it's beautiful, isn't it?
And while it's a welcome sight for some, it's nowhere near enough to get the fire crews off the road for some respite.
Rain like this is a blessing in some ways, but it's not so good for our fire control. It's a little bit too much moisture.
The full impact of the fires along the south coast is still unfolding. Late this afternoon, a 71-year-old man missing since New Year's Eve was found dead on his property west of Badalla. Another person remains missing near Bombala.
Whether they've gone to family and friends, that's what we're hoping for, or whether it's something more tragic, we just don't know at this stage.
Tactical backburning wasn't an option. Still, crews made the most of the improved conditions, clearing fallen trees and assessing damaged buildings for unstable walls and asbestos. Among the properties lost, the Mogo Gallery and home of artists Vanessa and Peter Williams, now in ruins.
Our house wasn't just a house, it was... Vanessa was tuned it to be almost like a museum.
It was beautiful.
It was full of our art and precious things, and we'll never have it again.
The blaze that roared through was so hot, unfinished pottery didn't need to go into the kiln.
So the fire actually finished off my work and me.
We've just had our 40th Christmas here and now it's all gone.
Power remains out for thousands on the south coast and is likely to remain so for some days. Phone and internet communication is patchy and petrol is still in limited supply. Locals in the Eurobodalla Shire have been told to start boiling their tap water after supplies were boosted straight from the river.
Look, the rain's lovely, we'll be right.
In Batemans Bay, locals are trying to return to some semblance of normality, but the reality is that's going to take some time. And while the rain may have lifted spirits for now, this normally bustling holiday town is likely to suffer significant losses to business.
There's a lull at the moment, but we'll go back and see what happens.
Shaken communities remain on standby, with temperatures set to rise again later this week. Antoinette Collins, ABC News, Batemans Bay.
Supplies are slowly beginning to flow into bushfire-ravaged communities along the south coast. In Bermagui, the power is still out and locals are having to boil their drinking water. And near Eden, Australia's biggest warship is standing by. But tempers are starting to fray as locals ask why it's taken so long for help to arrive. Jonathan Hare reports from Eden.
The Navy has arrived on the south coast. HMAS Adelaide sits in the bay just to the south of the town of Eden. But in the background, a reminder that this part of the world is still under threat. A local woodchip mill burns, taken over by the border fire.
When we were, off the coast and in the bay, the conditions with visibility were horrendous, and it truly brought forth, the intensity and the severity of the fires that were in the area.
The Navy has brought with it 300 tonnes of supplies.
Where we are now is normally the aircraft hangar. We've converted it into Hotel Adelaide at the moment, ready to receive evacuees.
Officers are liaising with authorities on the ground to figure out where they're most needed.
The other thing that we have a capability of doing is, with our aircraft, is identifying those hotspots and identifying and doing damage assessments as well from the air.
But some locals are questioning if the Defence Force should have been called in earlier.
A bit late, really. Like, seriously, the armed forces should have been in place in August when this was all starting to unfold.
Jenny and Arthur Robb were evacuated from their home in nearby Kaya on Saturday. They're still unable to go home, and there's no word on when this roadblock will be gone.
It's just an emotional roller coaster, really. Like, you go from grief to anger to fear. You worry about your family.
The heavens have opened above Eden, but not enough rain has fallen to put the border fire out. Despite conditions, firefighters are working on.
We're here, so we thought we might as well do something that's helping the people in town a little bit, maybe give them a little bit more confidence and, just help them on their way, but they've got a big job in front of them.
Locals here in Eden have been through a harrowing few days, under the threat of fire and under a blood orange or simply black sky. Some are still down here at the wharf, near the water. Others can't get home. In Bermagui, roads are beginning to reopen, but locals have to boil drinking water and there's still no power.
I want to acknowledge Essential. They're working around the clock to get the power back on. It's great that we're starting to see food trucks turn up into Bermagui.
But in the interim, frustration is growing.
If these politicians don't get off their arse and do something and lead, don't follow, lead.
Weeks into this crisis, patience is wearing thin. Jonathan Hare, ABC News, Eden.
And Jonathan Hare joins us now from Eden, where it's raining tonight, but you can see the bushfires burning behind him. Jonathan, against this unusual backdrop, what exactly is the Navy ship going to be doing in Eden?
Well, helicopters from HMAS Adelaide have been flying reconnaissance missions for most of the day. They've been flying to towns in the west that are still being affected by bushfire. Of course, those helicopters can fly in bad conditions. They can also pick people up off the ground if they need to be evacuated. Officers from the ship have also been ashore speaking with local authorities, as we just heard, but they're yet to bring any supplies ashore. Now, people that are being let back into Eden have been coming to spots like this, where they can see what's happening behind me. The local wood chip mill is still on fire. If you zoom in, you can just see huge stockpiles of timber simply burning. Now, that's of course despite the rain. So it's been raining pretty heavily throughout most of the day. It's been soaking into the ground, but thunderstorms are still predicted for later this week, which means lightning could cause a problem for authorities in the days to come.
Jonathan Hare reporting there from Eden. The federal government has committed $2 billion to rebuild entire towns devastated by the bushfires. Over 2 years, a national bushfire agency will coordinate resources, providing support and services to those affected by the blazes. But some people on the ground say more immediate relief is needed. Political reporter Eliza Lashon has more from Canberra.
From the top end of the country, help is on its way. But in the middle of a disaster zone, providing relief is rarely easy. Cockpit vision from this RAAF aircraft shows how treacherous rescue missions can be when even the best laid plans to evacuate Malakuta thwarted by Mother Nature.
It's not possible to fly in or out of Malakuta, but we believe we may have up to another 300 people to move from Malakuta over the next few days.
More than 400 Army reservists have already been mobilised out of the 3,000 who received the compulsory call-out on the weekend. And from Canberra came an impassioned promise of help.
Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, we will ensure the resilience and future of this country.
The Prime Minister's announced the government will commit $2 billion to rebuilding bushfire-ravaged towns over the next 2 years. The National Bushfire Recovery Agency will be responsible for rebuilding roads and infrastructure, mental health support, attracting tourists back to fire-devastated regions, rolling out 20 Service Australia pop-ups to help bushfire victims access services like Medicare and Centrelink. But those who've been affected by the bushfires say what's been available until now is far from enough.
I'm disgusted in the way that the government's handling it.
Robert Provenzali lives with his partner, toddler and 8-month-old baby in Bateman's Bay. They've been without power for a week and without an income for 2 since the fires stopped his work on the local bridge upgrade.
There's tens of thousands of families that are going to need some sort of income in the next few weeks or maybe even months.
Social media posts also paint a picture of life in the wake of the bushfires with no support. One mother, who's being discharged from Canberra Hospital with newborn twins, writes,
"We are not able to get home to Eden. If you have a unit available, let me know."
While this man's entire workplace was destroyed by the fires, he simply says,
"Let me know if anyone has any work."
Disasters of this nature throw up any number of extraordinary challenges, and some of them are very difficult to deal with.
While $2 billion sounds like a lot of money, the challenge for the government now is getting that to people who need to pay bills, feed their children and find a place to live. Eliza Lachon, ABC News, Canberra.
The milder weather has allowed farmers to start assessing their stock losses, and they are devastating. Across Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia, the number of animals killed by these fires already exceeds 15,000. Bridget Rollison reports, and a warning, you may find some of the images in this story distressing.
In the scorched paddocks of Australia's southeast, the nation's livestock and the farmers who care for them are suffering.
This is quite possibly the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
When fire ripped through Adelong near the base of the Snowy Mountains on Friday, it burned almost everything in its path. Today, Andrew Reynolds faced the gruesome task of assessing which of his stock could be saved and found 31 of his cattle had to be put down.
I haven't been impacted, from fire like that before, and, it would just be a terrible way to die.
Farmers are urgently digging pits to dispose of dead animals, and the federal government is providing 100 vets to urgently assess stock.
If they need euthanizing, we'll do that. If they need to record they need feed or water, we'll do that.
This map shows the number of cattle and sheep being farmed inside the massive firegrounds affecting the nation's southeast. As many as 2.3 million cattle and 8.6 million sheep will potentially be affected. That makes up 9% of the national herd and 12% of Australia's sheep flock. But the stock losses are just the beginning. For those animals that were evacuated or managed to survive, feed levels have been devastated, and dairy farmers have been pouring out thousands of litres of milk because trucks just can't get in to pick it up.
We've got obviously still a lot of road closures and there's difficulty getting transport around, both for the delivery of feed but also for the delivery of product back out.
The long-term implications for Australian farmers will stretch over many years. But Andrew Reynolds is just trying to get through today.
I might try to put on a happy face, but I was having a little cry in the corner occasionally. Don't worry about that.
For now, the future is difficult to see. Bridget Rollison, ABC News.
It's feared nearly half the wildlife on Kangaroo Island has been wiped out in the bushfires. Many rare species, including bees, birds and marsupials, could be near extinction, with their habitats changed beyond recognition.
Peter Davis has had his business ravaged by fire.
We have a community spirit here on Kangaroo Island that is not burnable. It hurts. It hurts to see this, and I don't want anyone to go through this again.
He thinks he's lost up to 400 of his 1,000 beehives, and some are still under threat. But even those that have survived may not be able to produce honey.
If we can't get them onto a resource where there's flowers, where there's nectar and pollen for them, the queens will stop breeding and they will just decline in numbers.
The industry is still counting the losses, but already estimates a quarter of the island's hives are gone, and it can't be easily rebuilt. Bees can't be brought onto the quarantined island, as it's home to the most pure strain of Ligurian honeybee in the world.
There are a lot of birds in the burnt-out trees here, more than we've seen in most of the hardest-hit areas. For wildlife, these bees and what's left of the honey might be one of their only sources of food.
At the KI Wildlife Park, koalas are being nursed back to health, but it seems they're the lucky ones.
I'm guessing well over 50% of our koala population's gone.
It's estimated 50,000 live on the island, a rare population without chlamydia. But it's not just koalas the locals hold grave concern for.
Glossy black cockatoos, the habitat's gone. The Kangaroo Island dunnart, the habitat where they were only found, that's wiped out.
Wildlife has always been one of KI's biggest drawcards, and despite the devastation, locals are begging people to make plans to visit soon.
Don't give up on Kangaroo Island, because we're not going to give up.
Casey Briggs, ABC News, Kangaroo Island.
Light rain around Canberra has helped settle the hazardous smoke that choked the city over the weekend. But the capital is still experiencing some of the worst air quality in the world.
What a difference a day makes. Temperatures in Canberra dropped markedly overnight, and there was the slightest drizzle of rain. The sinister copper glow has gone, but Canberra's air quality is still among the worst in the world. It's 5 times worse than what's considered hazardous.
We haven't seen this degree of fires for this length of time, in particular the smoke impacting on Canberra to this degree ever.
Today, the public service returned to work after the Christmas break, but some departments, like Home Affairs, told staff to stay home. National institutions, including the Art Gallery and Questacon, also kept their doors shut.
The Commonwealth has replenished the ACT with 102,000 P2 masks after a number of stores sold out. But the advice from authorities is the safest thing to do is to just stay indoors.
And if the smoke seeps inside, there are some DIY tips being shared on social media. The smoke haze stretched to Melbourne, with the city's landmarks almost invisible. Some took to wearing masks.
Hi, son. Thank you.
Back in Canberra, chemists are restocking their shelves, and people with health conditions, the elderly and pregnant, are being urged to collect the free masks tomorrow. The smoke is forecast to stick around, as the ACT is told to brace for another total fire ban on Friday.
Now, my aim is that the fires do not get anywhere near our residents. But in the event that we do, we need you to be bushfire ready.
For cities like Melbourne and Canberra, the smoke is the worst of it for now. Talia Roy, ABC News, Canberra.
Firefighters across the country have been flooded with donations and care packages for fire-affected towns. Those resources are trickling into devastated areas where supplies are running low. As for the millions of dollars in publicly raised funding, where that will go is still being determined.
As burnt out and isolated communities along the New South Wales south coast become starved of supplies, help arrives by the truckload.
No, I think we're taking the bags of feed into the... We managed to fill the truck with clothing, toiletries, food, water, anything, non-perishable items, stock feed, hay, pellets, anything that they can use.
What we've seen over the last 3 weeks of the way that the fires have been through here, terrible.
They're hero convoys for towns desperate for provisions.
Supplies are getting a bit tough. We're going to be having to start fishing the river, I think.
We've had some more deliveries overnight of groceries, so up in the pavilion.
Just the essentials, tin food, milk, bread.
As well as the essentials, more than $55 million has been raised for the Rural Fire Service. It means the tightly government-funded resource is more cashed up than ever.
I think it's absolutely lovely. I think it's wonderful, and I think it reflects the best we've got in humanity.
But the RFS now needs to think carefully about how the funds are distributed.
Our challenge is to make sure that through that generosity, we spend that money wisely and effectively.
Exactly how is yet to be worked out, but it will be decided with advice from its members. In Victoria, emergency services have been so inundated with donations of goods, they're now asking for cash only.
It's so generous have people been that it's causing a big logistics challenge, trucks on the road, staff being diverted from other important activities.
So the community spirit here, it's I don't know, it just warms my heart. It makes me cry because everyone's just come together to help out people they don't know, people they've met once or twice at the pub, and it's amazing.
Acts of charity helping to make this long fire season endurable. Lily Mayers, ABC News.
In other news, Australia's military involvement in Iraq has been thrown into jeopardy following the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. The Iraqi parliament has passed a resolution asking its government to throw out all coalition troops, including 300 Australians. Middle East correspondent Adam Harvey reports from Beirut.
Qasem Soleimani's body arrives at Tehran airport before dawn, as Iran mourns a national hero. He's receiving a send-off normally reserved for heads of state. Crowds of more than 1 million in his home city of Avaz, and vast numbers in Tehran. The implications of his death are being felt across the Middle East. In Beirut, the killing has energised supporters of the militant group Hezbollah.
Trump now, because he is a fool, he is attacking Iran, he is attacking our leaders, and this is never and will not be acceptable.
Hezbollah is such a powerful and dangerous force, partly because of Qasem Soleimani. He helped build it. Killing him has made this volatile place even more unpredictable.
Hezbollah's elusive leader says US soldiers, not civilians, will be the targets.
The suicide attackers that got the Americans out of the region are still present, and they're now in greater numbers than they were in the past.
In Iraq, MPs voted to evict foreign troops, including 300 Australians. The government is not bound by the vote, but it's an indication of the depth of feeling among Iraq's Shia population. Of more consequence, Iran's leaders have now declared they will no longer be bound by a promise to limit uranium production. Donald Trump tore up the deal in 2018, reimposing sanctions and beginning the swift deterioration in US-Iran relations, which now threatens to explode into open conflict. Adam Harvey, ABC News, Beirut.
A movie set in the golden age of Hollywood has taken home the most gongs at this year's Golden Globe Awards. The Quentin Tarantino film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood took home Best Script, Best Supporting Actor for Brad Pitt and Best Musical or Comedy. But it was Australia's bushfire crisis that dominated speeches by local and international actors.
Before I say anything, Australia, I love you. My heart goes out to everyone who is suffering in Australia, all the animals that we've lost.
I wanted to do a special call out to the volunteer firefighters who have been at the centre of battling the climate disaster that is facing Australia.
Russell Crowe took out a Globe for playing a disgraced news boss in the TV series The Loudest Voice. In finance news, economists say the bushfires are tragic, but they may not pose a major threat to the economy. Disasters are typically followed by government support, and Treasurer Josh Frydenberg has signalled that a budget surplus is no longer a priority. Here's Philip Lasker.
It goes without saying you can't put a price on the loss of life or suffering caused by this disastrous bushfire season, or the drought for that matter. In the end, you can't escape the cold hard numbers either, and there are always winners and losers. Insurance companies carrying the burden of reconstruction are being sold down. Then you have stocks like Adelaide Brighton, which makes building products. Previous major disasters do not tell us much about the impact on Australia's GDP. If you look at the Black Saturday fires in 2002 and the Queensland floods in 2011, growth fell during the disasters but bounced back the next quarter. Devastation is followed by reconstruction with a fair degree of government spending, so for GDP purposes, they could cancel each other out. And it appears the government surplus is no longer sacred. See those green areas? According to the Grattan Institute, they account for 80% of Australia's economic activity, the dollar value of goods and services produced by workers. The drought has had a significant impact on agriculture, but the bushfires are mostly burning in areas where there's not a lot of economic activity, although they're areas important for the environment, tourism and our general well-being. Financial markets are focused on the escalating tensions between the US and Iran. As a result, gold and oil prices are surging. Bullion is at a 7-year high. It's no surprise that gold and oil shares featured among the gainers on the domestic market. The bushfires have hurt bigger cheese, though. The Australian dollar is weaker across the board. It's trading under 69.5 US cents. And that's finance.
Australia has completed an unbeaten summer of Test cricket with a 279-run win over New Zealand in the final Test. David Warner made 111 runs in his second innings and Nathan Lyon claimed 10 wickets. The Kiwis were dismissed for a disappointing 136 runs on day 4.
The Australians were miles ahead on day 4 with 243 runs already on the board, but were determined to drive home their advantage. For Joe Burns, it was a chance to firm his place in the Test ranks after a lacklustre summer.
So the second 6 of the day for Joe Burns.
The aggressive partners cruised to 100, while workhorse Neil Wagner needed a breather. The Black Caps took the time to review Burns' wicket and brought him undone on 40.
And hitting the wickets.
David Warner teased the Kiwis' bowling attack, bringing up his 24th Test ton. Marnus Labuschagne added 59 runs to his impressive streak, enough for skipper Tim Payne to declare. Tensions were high among the New Zealanders, staring down a 416-run chase. And barely off the mark, the Kiwis caved.
That's taken by Nathan Lyon, who's dancing around as he should be.
The party was just getting started for Lyon.
Yeah! Oh, a little touch, was it? What an absolute beauty.
Sending debutant Glenn Phillips off for a duck.
And he's given this one as well.
The visitors were in all sorts of trouble and Pat Cummins got a piece of the action.
Oh, yeah, it's a peach. That's a peach.
Sidelined skipper Kane Williamson watched on in horror.
Is it going to land in the gap? Oh, what a catch! Jake Atkinson has taken one of the great catches at the SCG.
While Lyon reached new heights, taking his 10th wicket for the Test.
Been very special to be a part of and to win all tests at home and be pretty clinical in all wins. It's been very, very impressive.
The number 2 ranked Test team falling apart.
After that first Test match, they put us under pressure session after session and we were never able to reverse it.
Australia's 279-run victory wrapping up a perfect summer. Chloe Hart, ABC News.
Checking the weather now, and those raindrops today were few and far between, but they did bring a little bit of cool relief to the state's east. Sydney had some loud thunder followed by a very light shower just before dawn, only 1 millimetre or 2, but some areas may receive another light fall this evening. Overnight lows ranged from 4 degrees at Thredbo to 29 at Lightning Ridge. There were light showers over central and southeastern parts of the state. Even the best falls, though, were only 5 to 6 millimetres. It was hot across the north, getting into the high 30s and low 40s west of the ranges, 44 the top temperature at Bourke. Nationally, Tropical Cyclone Blake is bringing rains and storms across northern parts of WA and the Northern Territory. A band of low pressure from WA to New South Wales is generating thundery showers. You can see the cloud associated with that system, bringing scattered showers and cooler temperatures to the south of New South Wales in particular. From tomorrow, things will start to dry out again with a return to hot, windy conditions by the end of the week. In the capitals tomorrow, sunny and hot in Perth and Adelaide, some morning drizzle in Melbourne. Around New South Wales tomorrow, a shower or two and the chance of a thunderstorm through most eastern districts, possibly extending to parts of the northern inland in the afternoon. North to northeasterly winds tending southeasterly in the far west. Dry over the southern inland and far west. Areas of bushfire smoke in the east and over the western slopes. Fire danger is very high for the central ranges, northwestern and southern slopes. Hot over the northern inland, daytime temperatures above average, tending below average over the southeast. Tomorrow there'll be a gradual shift back to northeasterly winds in most coastal areas before the next southerly change affects southern and central waters during Wednesday. In Sydney tomorrow, it'll be warm and overcast, high 20s in the city and mid-30s further west. There's the possibility of a very light shower, probably less than a millimetre. Sun's up at 5:51, and over the next 7 days, apart from the possibility of the odd light shower, it's going to become drier, warmer and windier with smoke haze and the occasional thunderstorm. And we're just hearing reports of some decent rain falling right now in various parts of the state, including the Central Coast, also Canberra. Stay with us on ABC. 7:30 is next with Michael Rowland.